The afternoon sun streamed in golden beams through the wide window, bathing the room in a warm light that seemed to belong to another time, a time that no longer existed for Grace Thompson. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, her hands resting on her lap, fingers intertwined as if trying to keep her body from trembling. In front of her, a tall mirror reflected an image that still felt unfamiliar. The face was delicate, the features perfectly sculpted, the body slender and elegant. Everything looked like it had been taken from a fashion magazine, except for the eyes. In the eyes still lived the woman she used to be, tired, wounded, marked by years of silence and rejection. The distant sound of the city drifted up to her, mingled with the song of a bird perched on the balcony. Life went on, indifferent to the fact that Grace was trying to understand who this new version of herself really was. She ran her hand through her hair, now straight and silky, so different from the rebellious waves she used to wear. She caught the scent of expensive perfume clinging to her clothes, an aroma she didn't recognize as her own. Every detail screamed change. But inside, there was still the pain of someone who had been broken into pieces. At that moment, the door opened softly. Daniel Hart walked in, bringing with him the fresh smell of freshly brewed coffee. He stopped at the threshold, watching her like someone appraising a rare painting. "You still can't see her, can you?" he asked, his voice deep and controlled. Grace lifted her gaze, taking a second before answering. "She isn't me." Daniel took a few steps, stopping beside the mirror. "Maybe she isn't, yet, but she can be whoever you choose." The words hung in the air, light and heavy at the same time. Grace looked away toward the city outside, where cars rushed past and people crossed streets without imagining that, right there, a life was being redesigned. She felt a pang in her chest at the thought of Michael, of the nights waiting for him to come home. The cold excuses, the phone calls that ended abruptly. She also remembered the day it all ended, so abruptly and so unjustly. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, as if wanting to engrave that moment into her memory. When she opened them, she saw in the mirror not only the transformed woman, but a glimpse of the strength that was beginning to emerge. Grace didn't know exactly how she would do it, but she was certain of one thing: she wasn't alive by accident. Someone had erased her, and now she would choose how to light herself again. And this time, she would shine with a light that no one could ever ignore. Grace Thompson had learned to become invisible long before she changed her face. It was a sad skill, trained between stacks of dishes in her mother-in-law's kitchen and conversations that drifted around her like smoke. She knew how to smile when needed, apologize for existing in a hallway, and step back to fit into someone else's photos. Now, standing before the thin-framed mirror, that ability seemed useless. The new reflection drew attention effortlessly, and the uncomfortable question was no longer, "How did I end up like this?" but "Who will I be from now on?" That woman had a name that still felt heavy on her lips: Anna Mitchell. But Anna was only the surface of something that, inside, was still Grace, the woman who noticed the smell of bread baking and remembered to care for others before herself. Michael Thompson, on the other hand, didn't need to raise his voice to wound. He preferred the clean cut of a polite remark, the calculated pause between one sentence and the next. Tall, slim, always in an unwrinkled blue suit, he exuded the discreet citrus of shaving cream and the urgency of someone always on his way out. He spoke of meetings as if they were missions, and saw people as pieces that needed to function. With Grace, his gestures were like receipts, hurried kisses on the forehead, a good job spoken as if signing a document. If there had ever been love, it was trapped in a snapshot, the sparkle of the engagement, the beautiful promise, and then dissolved into a schedule, the car window, the silences in the elevator. Vanessa Park understood a space before she even crossed its threshold. Her heels tapped across the floor like her own private score, and her red lips were a stamp of presence. She wasn't just beautiful, she was deliberate. She chose perfume that lingered in memory, words that sounded kind while sweeping the ground from under you. Gestures so precise, they seemed casual, where there was calculation. She knew where to stand in a photo, with whom to sit at a dinner, when to brush someone's arm lightly. In Michael, she saw an elevator that only went up, and stepped in with conviction. In the reflection of tall building windows, she discovered a version of herself that enjoyed her own power and the shadows that power cast. Eleanor Thompson carried tradition on her shoulders like an inherited shawl. Her hands, laced with discreet rings, knew how to divide bread and willpower with equal care. She used sentences that ended in an ellipsis. You understand? And silence completed the judgment. To her, an ideal daughter-in-law was one who caused no trouble. Love, an arrangement that didn't go off-key. Problems, things to be swept away with polite conversation and a closed door. She called Grace a good girl, a compliment always accompanied by lists. Organize. Do it neatly, don't overdo it. There was a conditional tenderness in her that retreated whenever real life demanded courage. Daniel Hart seemed to breathe 2 seconds before the rest of the room. His attentive gaze collected details. A wrong fold on a sleeve, hesitation in a word, a glass left half full. He had inherited a chain of restaurants from his father, but it wasn't the fortune that defined his name, it was his care. In the kitchen of his apartment, there was a pot on the stove, herbs on the windowsill, cloth napkins that knew stories. He spoke with pauses that respected the other's silence, as if giving them the choice to fill it. When he crossed paths with Grace, he didn't promise salvation. He offered structure. He didn't say, I'll reinvent you. He said, I'll walk with you while you find yourself. And then, there was the woman the world would come to know as Anna. Mitchell, the persona, who would wear Grace's body to return to the scene where she had been erased. Before, she stepped lightly, as if apologizing to the floor. Her laughter ended in a whisper, and her hands knew the weight of pots and of other people's expectations. Afterward, the new face opened automatic doors. Waiters memorized her orders. Eyes lingered a second longer. The city seemed inclined to listen. The mirror delivered both freedom and discomfort. No one recognized her gestures, and that chafed like a new pair of shoes. Still, beneath the flawless skin, there lived an unshakable trait, the ability to notice what others preferred to hide. The places also told their stories. Michael's house smelled of flowers bought early and promises that never aged. Aligned cushions concealed postponed conversations. His office had sharp angles, a huge window, and light that illuminated without warming. Daniel's apartment, by contrast, embraced you. Books open on the table, an apron hanging on a chair, the constant sound of water filtering in the corner. There, time didn't run, it circled as if every object had a story that didn't need to be proven. Orbiting this system were useful satellites, colleagues who knew when to keep silent, friends who confused advice with judgment, relatives who always chose the side with more napkins. Vanessa's manicurist kept secrets under layers of polish. The Mater D at Michael's favorite restaurant memorized the no time to waste order. Eleanor's driver knew routes to avoid not just traffic, but any confrontation. At the center of it all, a single, unyielding thread. Choice, Michael chose ambition. Vanessa, opportunity. Eleanor, tradition. Daniel, care. Grace still had to choose herself. As the afternoon slid down the wall like liquid gold, Daniel waited by the door without hurry. Grace touched the cold frame of the mirror and, for the first time, felt that the future would not ask permission. When they called for Anna, she would already know how to answer, and, with her own voice, she would begin to change the stage that had reduced her to the role of an extra. In Grace's memory, there was a time when life seemed simple. Mornings began with the smell of fresh coffee and the muffled sound of the television in the living room. She would prepare Michael's breakfast, adjust his tie with a shy smile, and watch him walk out the door, believing that her role was to keep him comfortable. But that time slipped away, almost without her noticing. Michael's small gestures of kindness became rare, replaced by a polite distance. At first, Grace tried to bridge it. Elaborate dinners, surprises, loving notes slipped into his briefcase. All of it seemed to evaporate before it was even noticed. The most painful change wasn't the coldness, it was the absence. Michael no longer looked at her the way he used to. His gaze passed over her like someone glancing at a billboard they'd seen 1,000 times. It was an automatic gesture, stripped of curiosity. Grace began to wonder if she was asking too much by wanting to be seen. The final blow came on an afternoon that seemed ordinary. She was at the market, picking fruit, when, by chance, she saw Michael on the other side of the street. He wasn't alone. At his side, Vanessa smiled like someone who knew exactly where she was standing. Grace froze, the apple forgotten in her hand. There was nothing indecent in their gestures, only an intimacy far too close to be explained away. She returned home without the courage to confront him. She tried to convince herself she might be imagining things. But in the days that followed, his schedule grew even more unpredictable, his excuses more rehearsed. When he finally admitted that he was spending a lot of time at work with Vanessa, he said it as if he were reporting something trivial, not worth any drama. Grace felt the ground open beneath her. Not only because of the betrayal, but because of the way he treated her, as if she were too fragile to understand or, worse, as if she didn't matter. The following week came the accident. It was a night on a slick road, but there was no rain. Grace had decided to drive to her mother's house, searching for a place to breathe. The headlights of a car approached too quickly in her rearview mirror. She tried to change lanes, but the vehicle behind her didn't slow down. The impact sent her spinning out of control, and the world turned in a succession of flashes and metallic crashes until everything went silent. When she opened her eyes, she was lying in a white bed, the constant sound of machines around her. The pain was diffuse, but the greatest pain came from within. Daniel Hart was there, watching her closely. "You're lucky," he said, his voice deep and firm. But this wasn't just an accident. Grace frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" "Let's just say, someone wanted to make sure you had no chance to defend yourself." The weight of those words hung between them. Grace didn't have the strength to process it all. But she recognized something in his eyes. A silent promise that this wouldn't go unpunished. In the days that followed, Daniel visited her often. At first, she was irritated by his presence, a stranger who seemed to know too much. But little by little, she realized he wasn't there to judge her or pry information from her. He observed, he listened, and when he spoke, he offered alternatives that seemed both impossible and dangerous at the same time. It was during one of these visits that he made the proposal. "You can disappear, Grace. Let them think you're dead and start over. But for that, you'll have to stop being who you are." She stayed silent for a long moment, feeling the weight of his words. "And who would I be?" Daniel gave a faint smile. "Someone they'd never recognize. Until it's too late." The plan sounded like something out of a movie. Surgery, to reconstruct and reshape her face. A new name, a new past. At first, Grace thought the idea was absurd. But every time she remembered Michael's look of contempt, or Vanessa's calculated smile, the fire inside her grew. The first time she stepped into Daniel's rehabilitation center, she felt fear. The place was quiet, with light-colored walls and the scent of lavender that tried to calm her. Daniel introduced her to a team of specialists, doctors, trainers, even an etiquette consultant. "We're not here to create a mask," Daniel said. "We're here to create your freedom." The transformation began almost imperceptibly. Physical therapy sessions to regain her body's strength, exercises to correct her posture, diction lessons to give firmness to her voice. Gradually, the face in the mirror began to change. The lines she once knew, as well as the palm of her hand, became something else, as if someone were redrawing her story. With each change, Grace felt a strange mix of power and vulnerability. The world would no longer recognize her. But what if she stopped recognizing herself too? It was one of those mornings, after weeks of rehabilitation, that Daniel introduced the name Anna Mitchell. Grace repeated it, savoring the sound. It was firm, direct, impossible to confuse with who she had been before. "I like it," she said, and for the first time, she felt she had taken a step toward something she could call her own. But Daniel made sure to remind her, "Anna isn't just a name. It's a mission. Are you ready to go back into the world that tried to destroy you and make them regret it?" Grace took a deep breath, her heart racing. There was no turning back now. Anna Mitchell was about to be born, and with her a plan no one would see coming. The first time Grace saw her full reflection after the final procedure was like facing a stranger who knew far too much about her. The room was silent, lit by a soft light that avoided harsh shadows. Daniel stood beside her, watching without hurry, as if he knew this was a moment that couldn't be rushed. The face in the mirror had harmonious features, skin without scars, eyes that seemed larger and more expressive. Her hair, once unruly, now fell straight to her shoulders, gleaming like polished glass. Grace lifted her hand and touched her own face, feeling the smooth, unfamiliar texture of skin that didn't seem to be hers. "It's you," Daniel said, breaking the silence. "Only now, everyone will have to look twice before they say so." She tried to smile, but the gesture came out hesitant. It wasn't just her appearance that had changed. It was as if every detail of her body had been fine-tuned to sustain a new story. From that day on, the training shifted from physical recovery to identity building. Her etiquette consultant, a tall woman named Miranda Collins, taught her how to walk with an upright posture, meet someone's eyes without wavering, and use pauses in speech as silent weapons. "When you enter a room," Anna Miranda would say, always insisting on the new name, "people should feel something in the atmosphere shift. Not because you force it, but because you're at peace with who you are." Anna repeated the exercises in front of a large mirror, walking slowly, turning her head at the right angle, controlling her breathing. It seemed trivial, but every gesture carried a message to the world. "I am here, and you will hear me." Her diction lessons were led by a deep-voiced instructor named Leonard. He corrected every syllable, trained her to speak with clarity, and erased the hesitant tone that had once marked her. "Confidence isn't just in what you say," he explained. "It's in how you occupy the sound." Meanwhile, Daniel focused on the strategic side. He showed her photos from social events, pointing out faces, commenting on behaviors. "This man here, Mr. Brooks, is one of Michael's top investors. He loves charm, but he has no patience for indecision. And this woman beside him, Catherine Miller, is a close friend of Vanessa. She's the one you'll start with." It was a chess game in which every piece had a weakness. Anna absorbed each detail as if she were memorizing lines from a script. Only this time, the stage would be real. There were days when she doubted herself. Alone in her room, she would take off her high heels and feel her sore feet. The flawless makeup would dissolve under the warm water of her bath, revealing a face even more unfamiliar without its frame. It was in those moments that the past knocked on her door, reminding her that Grace was still there, hidden beneath layers of luxury and strategy. Daniel noticed the cracks. "You're not erasing who you were," he told her one night when he found her sitting on the floor, hugging her knees. "You're taking her with you. Grace is the reason Anna exists." Those words helped her keep going. As the weeks passed, Anna began to test her new identity in discreet places: cafes, clothing boutiques, small dinners. The reactions were always the same: curious glances, open doors, unexpected invitations. It was strange how the world seemed lighter when she carried a beautiful face, and cruel to think that, before eyes had simply passed over her. The turning point came one night when Daniel took her to a private event outside the city, just for practice. The room was filled with business leaders, politicians, and artists. Anna walked in wearing a simple black dress with a flawless cut. She didn't need to say a word to draw attention. She spoke with two women about wine, with a man about travel, and within minutes, she seemed part of that circle. It was there she realized something fundamental. Power wasn't just in what she showed, but in what she concealed. Every smile, every pause, every calculated glance was a piece of a puzzle no one knew was being assembled. On the drive home, Daniel said, "Now you're ready." Anna looked out the window, watching the lights of the road flash by. Ready for what? To go back? To look them in the eyes, without them realizing who you are, until it's too late. The next day marked the official start of the plan. The first phase would be simple. Re-enter Michael and Vanessa's social circle as a charming stranger. Then, gain the trust of the right people, one by one. The final phase. Well, that would only be revealed at the right moment. That night, alone, Anna stood before the mirror for long minutes. She wasn't looking for grace anymore. She was searching for a fusion, the strength of someone who had survived and the strategy of someone who had learned to reinvent herself. And for the first time, she smiled without hesitation. The woman in the reflection wasn't just ready to face the past. She was about to rewrite it. The first time Anna Mitchell saw Michael and Vanessa again was no accident. Daniel had chosen the setting with precision, a modern art exhibition at one of the city's most exclusive museums. It was the kind of event where new faces were welcome, as long as they carried enough presence and elegance not to appear out of place. Anna arrived alone, wrapped in a deep blue dress that contrasted with her fair skin and made her eyes sparkle under the salon's soft lighting. She walked with measured steps, the discreet sound of her heels echoing across the polished floor. In one hand, a silver clutch, in the other, her newly earned confidence. Michael stood with his back to her, talking to a group of investors. Vanessa, always immaculate, wore a red dress that drew glances, but at that moment, she seemed more intent on following every word Michael said. Anna didn't approach immediately. She preferred to watch, absorbing every gesture, every calculated laugh. The man who had once been her husband seemed exactly the same. Upright posture, air of authority, that way of holding a wine glass as if he owned the entire place. And yet, Anna noticed something she hadn't before, a subtle insecurity. A quick touch to the collar, as if adjusting something invisible. She only stepped forward when she knew all eyes would turn. She stopped by one of the displayed paintings, positioning herself beside Michael and Vanessa. "Beautiful piece," she said, her voice firm with a hint of warmth. Michael turned first, and Anna felt the moment his eyes scanned her. There was curiosity, but no trace of recognition. Vanessa, on the other hand, measured her from head to toe, with the skill of someone used to identifying threats. "Indeed, it's impressive," Michael replied with a polite smile. "I'm Michael Thompson, Anna Mitchell," she answered, extending her hand. The touch was brief, but calculated to convey firmness. "Pleasure to meet you." Vanessa leaned in slightly, as if to stake her claim. "And what brings you here, Anna?" "Curiosity," she said with a faint smile. "And the opportunity to meet interesting people." They spoke for a few minutes, and Anna kept control over every word, every gesture. She revealed nothing personal, but planted small seeds of intrigue. When she took her leave, she knew she had left something in the air, a question without an answer. In the following days, Daniel helped her map the terrain. Every friend of Michael's, every contact of Vanessa's, every social event where she could appear without raising suspicion. Anna began infiltrating discreetly, becoming a familiar figure at charity dinners, gallery openings, and networking receptions. The strategy was simple: win over the people around them before confronting the center of the web. Within a month, she had befriended Catherine Miller, Vanessa's confidant, and two investors who admired her inspiring life story. A carefully crafted narrative about a businesswoman returning after years abroad. There were moments when the game almost collapsed, like the night she ran into Eleanor, her mother-in-law, at an auction. The woman looked at her intently, and for an instant Anna feared she had been recognized. But Eleanor merely commented on her elegance and asked if they had met before. "Perhaps at some past event," Anna replied, keeping her smile intact. Inside, her heart was pounding like a drum. With each step, the tension grew. She was playing with fire, and she knew it, but the sense of control was addictive. For the first time in years, she wasn't reacting, she was moving the pieces. The most revealing moment came on a rainy afternoon when Catherine invited her for coffee. Between sips, Vanessa's friend let slip that Michael and Vanessa's marriage had been stronger than ever since Vanessa had taken a more active role in his business. Anna feigned casual interest, but inside she stored the information. Vanessa's influence wasn't just emotional, it was financial. Undermining Michael's trust in her would be the most effective strike. Daniel reminded her to be patient. Rushed revenge is like poorly aged wine, he said. You have to wait for it to develop the right flavor. And she waited. She waited until Michael began to seek her company. She waited until Vanessa started asking acquaintances about her. She waited until the web was woven tightly enough that, when the time came, she could pull the right thread. The game had only just begun, and Anna knew that, this time, she would not be the discarded piece. She would be the player who decided how the match would end. The hotel ballroom was bathed in golden light from crystal chandeliers, casting warm reflections over mirrored walls. It was the night of the Thompson Foundation's annual charity gala, the crown jewel of Michael and Vanessa's social calendar, where all the city's most important names gathered to exchange compliments and seal discreet deals. Anna entered as though she had always belonged to that world. She wore a long black gown with subtle silver accents that caught the light with every movement. Her hair was styled into an elegant chignon, revealing the clean lines of her face and neck. There was no hurry in her steps. She wanted every second of her entrance to be noticed. Michael spotted her first. His smile spread, perhaps out of courtesy, perhaps for reasons even he couldn't explain. Vanessa took a moment longer to notice her. When their eyes met, Anna caught the cool gleam of assessment, and also the seed of insecurity. The night unfolded with toasts, speeches, and photographs. Anna moved among the guests as if testing the reach of her presence. She approached investors, exchanged words with politicians, drew laughter from people who rarely smiled. Each conversation was another piece in the mosaic she had been constructing. It was near the end, as the ballroom began to empty, that Anna made her move. She approached Michael, who was standing alone by the bar. "Beautiful evening," she said, her tone seemingly casual, but layered with subtext. "No doubt," he replied, leaning slightly toward her. "I'd say you've been one of the night's most pleasant surprises. I'm flattered." She held his gaze for a second longer than necessary. But surprises aren't always pleasant, are they? Michael's brow furrowed, as if trying to decipher her meaning. Before he could speak, Vanessa appeared. "There you are," she said, her rehearsed smile in place, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "Anna, isn't it?" "Yes," Anna replied, turning toward Vanessa. "We were just talking about how life is full of twists." Vanessa kept smiling, but her eyes narrowed. "Oh, certainly. Some good, others not so much." Anna knew the moment had come. With the calm of someone who had prepared for this for months, she stepped close enough for only the two of them to hear. "Some people change. Others just take off the mask." The silence that followed was brief but heavy. Vanessa blinked slowly, and Michael straightened his posture, as if trying to regain control of the moment. Anna walked away without waiting for a reply, leaving them together at the bar, surrounded by attention that hadn't been there minutes earlier. But the true blow would come hours later. Daniel, always in the background, had gained access to documents proving that Vanessa had diverted part of the foundation's funds into a personal account. It wasn't just a financial hit, it was an attack on the pristine public image she had worked so hard to cultivate. By the next morning, the news began to circulate quietly among investors and partners. No one knew where the information had come from, but everyone began to look at Michael with new questions in their eyes. Vanessa called Michael repeatedly throughout the day. From a distance, Anna watched the tension mount. Every unanswered call, every ignored message, was another crack forming in the castle they had built together. 2 days later, Michael walked into the cafe where Anna often spent her afternoons. He looked tired, his tie loosened, his gaze heavy. "I needed to talk to someone who isn't involved," he said, sitting across from her. Anna took a sip of her coffee before replying. "And why do you think I'm not involved?" He exhaled heavily. "Maybe because you seem real." She smiled, but said nothing. She didn't have to. The seed was planted. The climax wasn't a shout, nor a public confrontation. It was silent, almost intimate. Michael beginning to doubt Vanessa, their friends quietly drifting away. The perfect image fracturing without anyone able to pinpoint when it began. And at the center of it all was Anna, serene, knowing she was only harvesting what had been so carefully sown. The past had tried to destroy her. Now, she was the one rewriting the ending. Winter was beginning to give way to the first signs of spring when Anna decided it was time to end her journey. The city seemed brighter, the air lighter, and even the distant hum of traffic carried a different rhythm. She knew the transformation was complete, not just in her face, but in her soul. Vanessa had vanished from the society columns. After the documents exposing her embezzlement came to light, investor trust evaporated. Michael tried to defend his wife, but in the face of undeniable evidence, the distance between them grew into an unbridgeable chasm. The foundation's meetings were suspended, sponsorships withdrawn. The empire they had flaunted with pride was now just a castle with cracked walls. Anna, on the other hand, walked through the city without fear. She no longer needed to hide, but neither did she feel the need to flaunt herself. She owned her story now. There was no bitterness left, only the awareness of what she had overcome. Daniel watched her with the calm of someone who knew his role was coming to an end. They walked together through a park, among trees just beginning to bloom. "You did it," he said, without looking directly at her. "I did," Anna confirmed, "but not in the way I imagined." "How so?" "I thought revenge would complete me. But in truth, what freed me was realizing I no longer needed anyone's approval, not his, not the approval of the woman I used to be." Daniel smiled, as if he had known the answer all along. In the days that followed, Anna began to close chapters. She called Eleanor, her former mother-in-law, not to accuse, but to thank her for the times when, despite her reservations, she had shown genuine care. The call ended in an emotional silence. She visited the neighborhood where she had grown up, walked down familiar streets, greeted familiar faces, and for the first time in a long while, she felt she belonged somewhere. The final meeting with Michael happened by chance, or perhaps by the kind of coincidence fate quietly arranges. He was alone in a cafe, leafing through a newspaper. When he saw her, it took him a moment to recognize her, and another to understand who she was. "Grace," he said, with a mix of surprise and disbelief. "Anna," she corrected softly. "Grace is in the past." He lowered his gaze, unable to bear the weight of the moment. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything." Her voice remained calm, almost gentle. "I just hope you've learned something from all of this." There was a silence heavy with all the conversations they had never had. Anna stood, left money for her coffee on the table, and walked away. There was nothing left to be said. That night, from the terrace of her apartment, she looked out at the city lights. Daniel joined her, carrying 2 cups of hot tea. "And now?" he asked. Anna gazed at the horizon, where the lights blended with the stars. "Now I live, without masks, without fear." It was a new dawn, and this time, she knew the sun was rising for her. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink when Anna received Daniel's message. "Meet me on the rooftop." She climbed the steps slowly, feeling the soft breeze that carried the distant aroma of bread baking at the corner bakery. Daniel's rooftop was a quiet refuge, surrounded by potted plants and small lights strung along the railing. He was there, leaning against the parapet, watching the horizon as if searching for answers in some faraway point. "I thought you'd already finished your mission with me," Anna said, stopping beside him. Daniel didn't take his eyes off the sunset. Missions end. Some people stay. Silence settled between them, broken only by the distant hum of car horns and the flap of a pigeon's wings as it passed. Then he drew a deep breath, as if gathering the courage to cross into painful territory. I never told you why I started helping people like you. His voice was lower now, almost hesitant. 8 years ago, I was engaged. Her name was Claire. We had plans, a whole life ahead of us. Anna stayed quiet, feeling the weight in each word. Claire was an investigative journalist. She was working on a case involving a group of corrupt businessmen, some of whom I knew because of my father. When she realized she was being followed, she told me she was scared, but she wouldn't stop. She believed she could expose the truth. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, as if reliving it. One night, she went out to meet a source. They found her car hours later, overturned, burned. Officially, it was an accident. I know it wasn't. Anna felt a knot in her throat. The cold wind brushed against her skin, but what made her shiver was the way he said her name, with reverence, but also with a void that years hadn't managed to fill. I tried to get justice, he went on, but they had money, influence, the same weapons that destroyed your life. I lost Claire, and with her, the illusion that the world is fair. So I decided that, whenever I had the chance, I'd help anyone being crushed by the same kind of system. Finally, he turned to face her. When I saw you in the hospital, Grace, I saw Claire in your eyes. Not because of how you looked, but because of that buried determination of someone who hasn't given up yet. Even when everything seems lost, Anna took a deep breath, letting every word sink in. For the first time, she understood that Daniel's support wasn't just altruism or strategy. It was also redemption. You saved me, she said, her voice trembling. Not just because you gave me a new face or a plan, but because you believed I could live without fear. Daniel stepped forward, closing the space between them. And now, are you ready to live? For you. Her heart raced. For months, her life had been guided by revenge, but in that moment, she realized there was something greater ahead. The possibility of being happy without looking back. Yes, she answered, with a smile that no longer carried pain. And I don't intend to do it alone. His gaze softened, and before she could say more, Daniel pulled her into a firm embrace that asked for nothing but presence. His touch wasn't about possession, but about promise. The promise that together, they could build something new, free from the shadows that had followed them. When they stepped apart, Anna noticed the city lights beginning to flicker on, one by one. I think tonight's going to be beautiful, she said. It will, he replied, looking at her as if he already knew. Because now, you're part of it. And there, on the rooftop, with the wind carrying away the last traces of day, Anna and Daniel took the first step into a story that hadn't been born from a perfect fairy tale, but from scars that had chosen to become a path. They didn't need eternal promises. It was enough to know that, when morning came, they'd be side by side. Some stories begin with loss, others with courage. But sometimes, they begin with both at the same time. That's how it was for Grace, or rather, Anna, and for Daniel. Two paths marked by different scars, crossing at the moment when they both needed not only a plan, but someone who believed in them. This wasn't just a story about revenge. It was a story about rebuilding. About learning that no matter how much others try to erase us, there is always something within us ready to be reborn. Anna found the strength to stand up and face those who tried to destroy her. Daniel found a reason to believe that life could still offer new beginnings. And together, they discovered that it wasn't just about surviving, it was about living with truth, love, and freedom. If you've watched this far, thank you for joining us on this intense journey. Here at Lasting Tales, every story is created to touch your heart and remind you that each of us carries the power to start over. If this story spoke to you, if at any moment you saw yourself in Anna and Daniel's fight or courage, I invite you to become part of our community. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell to receive our next stories. They are made for you and because of you, because every comment, every message, every view motivates us to keep going. and I truly want to know. Have you ever faced a moment when life placed you before an impossible choice, and yet you found the strength to keep going? Share it in the comments. I will read every word with care. And don't stop here. At Lasting Tales, we have many more moving narratives waiting for you. Stories of love, resilience, courage, and unexpected new beginnings. Click now on the next video and continue this journey with us. Here at Lasting Tales, every story leaves marks that time cannot erase. See you in the next one.